John, I'm going to ask you to follow that. I'm delighted to introduce once again John McDonnell. Many of you will know John. He's the Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington. He's fought, he and I fought together for many years on the Rousseau campaign, but John has fought many other campaigns over many, many years. So delighted once again to introduce John McDonnell.
I thought George's piece was startling, absolutely startling. Just run through it again. Programmatic.
Counter-hegemonic, holistic,
and compassionate.
Revolution.
It sums it up completely. On this optimism, pessimism debate, I'm the grand sweep phrase. Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. So you understand what you're up against, but you're bloody determined that you can defeat it or overcome it, and you're optimistic that you can. And I think that's what we are, actually. That's what we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And it's breaking out. I've come from an environmental festival in my constituency, and there's all sorts of fates and all the rest of it. You go from that. I've just visited Parliament Square, where Amnesty International have got a couple of dozen people campaigning for the Arms Trade Treaty Summit that will be coming up as well. And I think, as George's point, it's breaking out all over that people are actually demanding a say and actually demanding the power. I just want to speak very briefly about why we're at this state in this country at this particular time, and where I think we need to, I suppose, invest some of our energies and resources. And the reason I'm specifically concentrating on the United Kingdom is because I think it's quite significant that Cameron is not at Rio. I really do think that's significant. And I actually, if Putin's there, Maman and Singh is there, and Lagarde, Francois Hollande will be there. To not have your Prime Minister there actually is a statement of priority. Although I'm like Stephen, I'm a localist, I'm a grassroots advocate. We developed in my constituency what we call community socialism. It's one of the things that we were discussing. To be a socialist in the Labour Party, you have to be an ecstatic optimist. So why isn't Cameron there, given all the statements before the election? And this isn't party political, I'm not into that. Because actually, in 2008, when Cameron went off to the Arctic to hug the Huskies and all the rest of it, and then when he came out with that symbolic decision against the third runway, that was a major achievement, converting the Tory symbol into a tree, a major symbol. And we were hoping that that wasn't just electoral politics, there might have been some internalisation of the arguments that we've been putting forward. I've been trying to understand how political decisions and choices get made, and I've been looking at largely at the behest of my wife as a psychologist, around in developmental psychology. The guy Uri Brunfen-Brenner, who's basically developed the theory of bioecological human development, and his theory around what he calls proximal processes, and to cut through all the high-flying theory, basically his theory about child development and other development is obvious, that your views are formed by the environment around you, so you shape the environment around you, so it's that interactive, or for me as a Marxist, that dialectic, if you like, that goes on. And that's what happened with Cameron and the Conservative Party, and actually Ed Miliband as well, and others. That we created a climate for nearly a decade that wherever they went, a proximal process bumped into people. Wherever they went, they bumped into people raising the environmental issue at the local level, right the way up to the top. They couldn't move, but for someone being in their face saying this is an absolutely key issue. Now, what is it that's changed between 2008 and having that breakthrough with all political parties to acknowledge that this is a key issue that has to be addressed, whoever goes into government next, and what we've seen over the last couple of years and this refusal to go to Rio? Because what we've seen over the last couple of years, I can be optimistic about some policies, like the third runway, etc., but actually on many others. The feed-in tariff debacle was a farce, absolute farce. We put at risk the whole of the development of the solar industry in this country. The argument in Parliament was that they introduced a scheme which I supported, and within 18 months there had been 102,000 installations of solar installations of some sort. This is the first government policy where a government has said this is so successful, we've got to stop it. It's just extraordinary. And it's the same, and you can go back in more detail, individual areas as well, where the problems have been exacerbated rather than improved. On the emissions issue, well, we've seen the statistics. But I take the emissions issue down to the local level. I live in my constituency. I live in the ward where we have the highest air pollution in the whole of the country, the densest population apart from the City of London, because of the airport, the M4, the M25, and all the rest of it. On the MIT figures last month, 13,000 people a year die as a result of air pollution. I've been going through the Environmental Audit Committee, Select Committee in the Council, which is very good. I think Joe Wally does a good job. They think between 30 and 50,000. So that emissions get translated into my local level. We're dying. We're dying. I've got friends and others as a result of it. They're not just dying of respiratory conditions, but actually now dying as a result of cancer, resulting from it. So I think there's been a catastrophic failure from 2008 and the commitments we were given and what's happened now, but there has been a failure. The issue for me then is to acknowledge that, but not get pessimistic about it, but actually talk about what do we do about it. Now, part of that failure now is produced by this argument, excuse, that the environmental issues are not critical now because we're in the midst of a recession that's gone into a depression. Well, what do we do about that? Well, I think, going back to the old social psychology theory, really, these proximal processes, in other words, every time a politician visits somewhere, bumps into someone, speaks somewhere, or speaks to someone, or reads something, we've got to get back to the process now where these issues, the green issues, the environmental issues, are back in their face again. And our argument, I think, is we insert ourselves now into this economic debate. And at the simplistic level, at one level, we've had some of that discussion today with regards to climate change and jobs. The argument that we're suffering now from deflation or deflation as a combination of stagflation, well, obviously what we're saying is we can solve both those problems at the same time. We can create a level of demand, and we can also tackle the issues of consumer prices going up because the main consumer price going up is energy. We can actually provide you with an alternative in renewables that will reduce the price, but at the same time can give you 1 million jobs. So at that level, we've got to reinsert ourselves really into the economic argument right at the heart of it. But this is where I'll come to George's point very, very quickly. I think it's gone beyond that. I think this sort of almost Keynesian debate around the role of green issues has gone beyond that. I actually think now the system is in such a crisis that now people are open to a much wider debate. It's a debate that George has opened up for us, basically. I think people now are willing to look at systemic change. In fact, they're demanding it in some places. And they're demanding that systemic change because of an economic argument, either they're unemployed, they're living in poverty, and in parts of Greece can't feed themselves, and are committing suicide, and it's happening here as people lose their benefits. We've had a spate of suicides, particularly amongst people with disabilities who have lost their benefits. People are now coming to the conclusion there has to be change from the economic argument. I think we've got to insert ourselves into that debate, saying yes, there's got to be economic change because the system has to change because of environmental issues, but actually the two are integrally linked. And we can change the system in a way which both tackles the economic problems that we're facing, but at the same time we can tackle climate change as well. But I don't think it's just going to be about demand management with an increase in jobs or a spurt on renewables. I actually do think it's about engaging people about how we change society overall. So I just want one small example of that. On energy prices, the impact on energy that people are having, particularly as we move towards this winter, I think the demand to bring energy back into public ownership is going to be one that's relatively popular. But again, what I want to do is open up the point that Stephen's making. It doesn't have to be on the old nationalised form that's gone before. If there is to be a role for the state, we've got to change the form of the state. And that can be both at national, international, but also more crucially at the local level, so that people are doing it for themselves. And in that way, feel engaged, and then having done it in one area, they'll question other areas. And it opens up George's point, which is then it becomes a holistic discussion about the running of society and how people can engage in that. So on that basis, can I just say this? To be in the debate, you have to be at the debate. And I think the debate now is on the picket lines, it's in the demonstrations, and it's in the occupations. I'll tell you one place where it isn't. is the House of Parliament. And I think Caroline and others do an incredibly good job, much more than I've ever done. I think they do the best they can. Actually, the way in which we will change the world now is in that proximal process of how we relate to one another in concrete activities, demanding change and implementing change. And I think that's the discussion that we then have, because at that stage, whole governments then start to tick. And then you are in, whatever you call it, I think it's a revolution situation.
Yeah. John, thanks very much.